Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode 916. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is the pre-show, the magical, marvelous part of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we say outrageous things. Yes, it is. This is for August the 7th. Another busy convective day here. Goodness, it's been a summer of convection here. Typically down here where we are at this latitude in the summer, every day we have storms, absolutely, but they tend to be the random air mass storms, not necessarily organized. But this year it's been pretty organized on many days, like today and yesterday, where we've had these storms sweeping through that have produced a lot of wind damage, a lot of tree and power line damage. But thankfully, things have settled down for the evening where we are. And I know I've been so busy today, I've not had a chance to look at what is happening elsewhere, but I can see severe thunderstorm warnings lined up all the way from north of Savannah to Florence, South Carolina, to Raleigh, North Carolina, and severe thunderstorm warnings around Chesapeake Bay up into Delaware and Jersey. I'm only seeing one tornado warning up in parts of upstate New York here at 6:51 Central Time. And again, this is August 7th, 2023. There was a moderate risk, a level 4 out of 5 risk for parts of the eastern U.S. today, which is fairly anomalous for August. And a lot of folks were a little concerned about that. And I honestly don't know what's happened up in the Atlantic coast region. Once we get everybody on the show, we'll find out. But again, I've been so stinking busy here with convection in my local market. I've just not had a chance to discover what is happening in other parts of the great fruited plain. We'll do that in the weather roundup segment. And I hope we have enough people to do the show here tonight. I saw a note from Bill Murray. I think he's out. And I know that Jen Naramore is traveling. In fact, she's here in my state, in Alabama, doing some research on the super outbreak of 1974. And I know that she has got some stuff going on tonight. She probably cannot make it. In fact, we're all going to have dinner tomorrow night. Her crowd's going to come by the TV station here and going to have a little get together, which will be a lot of fun. Dr. Neil Jacobs is out of power. He is literally off the grid with the storms coming through the East Coast. So our East Coast correspondent is out. But I think most folks will be here. Hopefully Troy and James A. and Kim will be able to hop on board here tonight. But whatever, we're going to make this show work. And I do not actually have a contact for the guest tonight, and I hope Bill or somebody took care of that. So we'll find out. And if it's just me, hey, we'll talk weather. Trust me, I can talk weather. We have been short-staffed, and I'll say it's public knowledge today. We lost our morning meteorologist here. Her last day was last Friday, Taylor Serrallo, and Taylor is just incredible. It breaks my heart that she's not here anymore. Taylor was with me for 4 years. She is a graduate of the University of Georgia, their program, the atmospheric science program. Incredible academics, incredible heart, work ethic. Everything is right about Taylor. And we have done so many severe weather events together for the past 4 years, and she will be greatly, greatly missed. She is so good. So her last day was Friday, and Evan Chikvera, who also works with me here, he is on family leave. They just had a new baby. So to say we're short-staffed is an understatement. So I have been working through here, but I did get a few days off last week. The reason we did not do the show Monday night, I actually got 3 days off, and thank you to Dave Williams of WCIV in Charleston, South Carolina, for coming to help us. He was able to cover for me for 3 nights, which enabled us to go to Seattle for a few days. For those that don't know, we're trying to go to all the major league ballparks in the United States, MLB ballparks. And that was on our hit list, and we're Red Sox people, and the Red Sox happened to be in Seattle. So we went to watch the Red Sox play the Mariners at T-Mobile Field in Seattle for a couple of nights and had a great time. Very good visit, but we had to come right back, and that Dave had to get back to work in Charleston. But again, Dave Williams, thank you. WCIV, that's our sister station up in Charleston. Known Dave for a long time. He's just a great guy. So we are thankful for his service and the fact that I got a couple of days off. But other than that, it's been all work all the time, which is fine. And I tell people this all the time. I love coming to work every day, and I really mean that. I'm not just saying that as a, to make me look good. I really love coming to work every day. I mean, they're paying me to talk about weather. And if I was not doing weather, you know what I'd be doing? I'd be doing weather. I'd be somehow talking about weather. They just wouldn't be paying me for it. So, but anyway, the search is on. More than likely, what's going to happen, Evan will probably move into Taylor's shift, the morning shift, and we'll bring in somebody to replace Evan on the weekend shift. But whatever, that's all to come. So a little short-staffed here, but that's cool. But yeah, the summer of convection, June was tough here. It just didn't stop over and over and over. Typically, once we get to June, it's kind of quiet. June, July, and August. It's hot. It's muggy. We have random air mass storms, and they can be strong, but it's been a little different this year. But at the same time, while we've had these active convective days like this, the tropics are just dead. At least the Atlantic basin is dead. So that's something I guess we can celebrate. Rick, can you hear me? I got your audio. Oh, there you are. I see your video now.
Yes, sir, I can. How do I sound?
Good. Perfect. Is this a new set here?
Just move the room around.
I like it.
Yeah.
It almost looks so good. It looks fake. That's not one of these fake backgrounds, is it?
It's my wife over here is 100% responsible. So
I mean, it is a very nice look. The lighting is good. The audio is good. Everything looks great. That's a good looking set right there.
Well,
very nice.
Thank you. He gets all the credit.
All right. I see some folks coming online here. I know a lot of our folks are out. Neil has no power. And Jen is actually down here working on her super outbreak stuff in Alabama. We're going to see her tomorrow night, but I don't think she'll be on the show tonight. But we'll make this puppy fly. That's what we do. James Adelot, how was your trip, man?
It was exhaustingly fantastic. I do not sit still at all on vacation, so I kind of wear my family out as we got to be in the park early. Let's get up. It's 5:30. It's time to go. So
when did you shave?
I shaved this afternoon right before I came to work. It was more like mowing, I think, than shaving.
Yeah. Get out the old weed whacker.
It was a struggle. Like, ouch. I do the same thing. I do not shave. That is not on my list of things to do when I've got a few days off. It's not happening. And when I have to go back to work, you got to mow that stuff down. And all right, let's see. Karen, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And just as fair warning, we're live on YouTube now, and we are live on local television stations in my market at the top of the hour. That's when the show will start. And most people listen to the audio version of this, but we like to tell our guests that you are live on the interwebs. So for what it's worth, all right, let's see. We're at 6:59. I think everybody else is out tonight. Hopefully Kim can join us. Troy's melting down there in Austin. All right. Let's see here. I was telling everybody, but I'll mention it before we start the show. My heart is broken. My morning meteorologist, her last day was last week. Taylor Sorello, greatest. Really? She was so good. Oh, she was so good.
I saw that Facebook post.
Yeah. I just, goodness, she'll be successful in whatever she does. She is the greatest. I mean, we've had her on this show before, but anyway, it's the top of the hour. Welcome to our television viewers. So let's get this thing started. We're going to record track A and track B. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains, the weekly show all about weather. This is episode number 916 for the 7th of August, 2023. I can almost hear those footballs flying. Rick Smith, who does Oklahoma open up with this year?
First game is September 2nd against Arkansas State.
Ooh, okay.
The only reason I know that is because we have tickets to go to the game. So
well,
we got lots of family over in Northeast Arkansas, over in Ryan Vaughn country.
Don't we have some college games in August at the end of this month, the week before that? I think we have a few. They call it week 0.
I think so.
But yeah, come August, schools back here. All the public schools are starting this week, and high school football is about to start. College football is about to start. So fall has got to be getting close. Troy, are you looking forward to fall?
I'm trying to say what I want to say without us getting bleeped and filed on by the FCC,
it's streaming. You can say whatever you want.
106 today at Bergstrom that tied a record set back in 2003, and 106 at Camp Mabry. It's just a hellish summer here, and I know it is other places as well. I've just never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I feel for you. I mean, I look at these upper air maps, and it just doesn't move. That thing just doesn't want to move.
And of course, everything on the clockwise flow around the upper level high comes through Alabama and blows trees down. And every couple of days, the ring of fire. We've been kidding around about that the last couple of weeks, and I don't know. It's just amazing, and it's not. I talked to friends up in Corinth, Mississippi, up in Alcorn County. They had another 2 inches of rain over the weekend. They continue the ring of fire, and the next stop is Birmingham.
Yep. We have had a very active summer with convection, and not just the random air mass storms, but organized MCS type blobs. And it's been rough here the past couple of days. In fact, I've got probably 500 pictures and videos that I've got to go through just from today. And I saw one that came in about an hour ago where 4 cows were killed by a lightning strike, and 1 human was killed by a lightning strike in Alabama today, up in Florence.
Yeah. Well, I've actually put money up to the people in Alcorn County, Mississippi. If they can divert that stuff about 700 miles to the southwest, I would be really, really happy about that. I've got money on the table for them if they can do it.
Now, James Adelot has been traveling. He has been in the wild, wild west. How was your trip, James?
I have never taken so many pictures of a car thermometer readout in my life. I mean, I think every morning was in the 50s outside of Yosemite where we stayed. And I don't camp. I'm the great indoorsman. I don't camp. So we get close and in a hotel. But we had the Merced River right behind our hotel room. We could stand out on the balcony. And because of this winter's snow, all those creeks and rivers and waterfalls were just still beautiful. A lot of times they've dried up by now, but it was a whirlwind tour. If you don't mind the little meteorology pun, we hit 7 national parks in 10 days.
I also agree with you. For me, it's a minimum of Holiday Inn Express. That's it. If it's not Holiday Inn Express or above, Troy ain't going. So,
did you drive the whole way, James?
No, we flew into Eugene, Oregon, and flew back out of Fresno, California, but had a car in between. I think we did 1,900 miles just in between those two.
Wow.
But beautiful country, just hardly a speck of humidity. One of the workers, and of course, all the national parks are trying to recoup from the winter damage from all the snow. And while waiting for one of the flagmen I don't remember which national park, but he said, "Oh, today's rough. It's hot and it's humid." I glance at the thermometer, 75. I'm like, come on, man.
Yeah, come on, man.
What are you? Got a pretty good gig here, man.
Yeah. I'll send some cash out there even.
Yeah.
And the reason we did the show last week, the week before, because I was taking a few days off. I was scheduled to be off all week, but I got 3 days, but I'll take those 3 days. But we were in Seattle, and high was about 75, low was about 54. Dew point was about 45, not a cloud in the sky, just incredible. I mean, it was like you're walking out to a crisp late October fall day. Goodness, it was almost therapeutic.
You say Mariners, but it was really Taylor Swift, right?
Well, how'd you know? You don't need to share that publicly here. Yeah. But no, we saw the Red Sox up at T-Mobile Park, and we had a very good time. It was great. And, I looked down and saw that we went up to the Space Needle, and you can see, a couple of TV stations right below the Space Needle down there. I thought about trying to find Morgan Palmer, the man with the big voice.
He's right there.
I know he's right there below us, but we were just so stinking busy. But let's see, Rick, are you going to bring in Karen here? I know that Bill Murray typically does the guests. Maybe, Rick, you can bring in Karen because we have some very interesting items to discuss tonight.
Oh, I've got an intro for Karen.
Oh, you do? James A. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm behind on my show notes here.
I could do it, but it wouldn't be nearly as good as what James has got.
Okay.
The legitimate part, Karen is, before she flees the scene, and blocks me on all email and things. She is a senior forecaster at the National Weather Service in Tulsa. She did her master's thesis at the University of Oklahoma on heat bursts. And by the way, for Troy, the last 3 months have felt like a heat burst, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
And one of the cool things about Karen, she is a female in a STEM field. So another great example for my daughter and for girls everywhere. And some things you might not know about Karen, and she's probably about to spin her chair and jump out. She is a database of all things Las Vegas. And if you want to know where to get a Bailey's milkshake in Las Vegas, she can point you right to that spot, tell you what the price is, and probably tell you what the recipe is too. She knows more about Disney World than Mickey Mouse. She is a huge Boston Celtics fan, so nobody's perfect. And she probably knows why there's no National Weather Service app. She might not tell us, though.
I'd like to know.
That is very much above my pay grade, but it may not be above Rick's, though.
It very much is. And I was hoping you had the answer, though, because I'd love to know.
Did you two work in Norman at the same time when Karen was in what were you, an intern, a student intern? What do they call them?
I did overlap with Rick, and for a while there, I was Rick's shadow in the WCM program because I learned early on in my weather service career that I really liked interfacing with you guys in the media, EMs, and things like that. And I was very fortunate to have Rick as an influence early on and continuing in my career. So I started in Norman I was a volunteer in January of 2000. I'm dating myself a lot. But I started as a student during my junior year at OU and then continued through getting my master's degree. So I was there for 4 to 5 years.
And despite being a basketball star in Fritch, Texas, she was not on the OU ladies basketball team in Norman, despite her great talent on the basketball court. So, Karen, let's start. It's the standard question. What got you into weather?
So I got interested in weather when I was at the ripe old age of 6. So I grew up in the Texas Panhandle, like you said, Fritch, Texas. When I was almost 12, an F4 tornado rolled through my town. Thankfully, for how strong it was and how much damage there was, the fine folks at the Weather Service in Amarillo and the great broadcast media, which of course was how I first knew there was a tornado headed my way. They, gave us so much advance warning that there were only 7 fatalities in that. So I was kind of born into it growing up where I did. The reason I was interested even before that was the TV stations there in the Amarillo area. They always had every April to early May, they would have a tornado special where they would go over and they would talk about sirens and difference between watches and warnings and, why the Texas Panhandle got so much severe weather and all that. And little 6-year-old me, first time I saw that, I was like, tornadoes are pretty cool. Now, obviously, from a scientific sense, definitely do not like seeing what they do, but the science behind them is really interesting. And from then on, especially the fact that my parents raised me as an OU football fan, so it was kind of destined for me to do what I do now and to get my degrees where I got them from. So.
And as you went through undergrad, what was your thought process? Because we've got a lot of students that are podcast viewers, listeners to this. What was your thought process of, do I do grad school? Do I not do grad school, and why?
Grad school, for me, quite literally, I was told by my then science and operations officer, David Andra, there at the WFO in Norman. He came up to me and he said, basically, you can do what you want to do, stopping with a bachelor's, but you will get there faster and it will be better for you to go on and get a master's degree. And so when I got my bachelor's degree, I really decided I was not totally done with school. So I felt like I had more to learn, and the whole thesis research project, which brought me on here, I learned so much there, not only from a scientific standpoint and from a research standpoint, but from a people standpoint, because you have to work with so many people to be able to finish that master's thesis, and you learn to deal with personalities and things like that. So I felt like, if you are out there and you are, in a bachelor's program for atmospheric sciences or meteorology, and you're questioning whether to go on and get one of those master's degrees, you will learn, and you will learn things that help you outside of applied weather.
Very cool. Now, as you got into your master's, how did you decide on heat bursts as a topic for a thesis as a tornado freak?
So basically, the grant money that I got to do this research actually came from, at that time, was NCDC. So they're now the NCEI, and I cannot remember what that acronym is off the top of my head right now, but essentially that is the national clearinghouse for and storage location for climate data across the country. And that includes radar data. So they have a huge store of data from the time that the Doppler radars that the National Weather Service uses now, from the time that they were commissioned, those data are stored in Asheville, North Carolina at NCEI. And they are available to people to download and use with various weather software, whether it's just looking back at an event that they were interested in, or if they want to do some published research with it. So I was basically told, use the level 2 radar database and study something with it. And again, I can attribute the topic to David Andra there at the National Weather Service there in Norman. I said, do you have any ideas? And one of the things that he threw at me right away was heat bursts. I think part of the reason that was suggested to me as a topic is there was actually someone that I had worked with that was an intern back when the Weather Service had interns there in Norman, that he did his master's thesis from an observational standpoint using the Oklahoma Mesonet data to study, how many heat bursts and when they happen, climatologically, what time of day, what time of year, what is the typical, temperature increase that you see from those, those things from, say, a surface impact standpoint. And that was kind of fresh, I think, on people's minds there. And of course, having the Mesonet there, we found out that heat bursts were a lot more frequent than what people thought before, because we could see them now. And so given all of that, he's like, try heat bursts. And so that's kind of where I started.
Very cool. And I know as far as documenting heat bursts, Troy, what was the one in Texas in 1960 or something?
Up around Wichita Falls, I think around Vernon.
Okay.
I think there was a well-documented one. And, it's like Karen says, though, we've had 2 or 3 of them in the last 2 or 3 months here in Central Texas. And I think they're probably, Karen, a lot more numerous, like you say, than with our observational networks nowadays and things like that.
I'm a crummy interviewer, Karen. Tell us what a heat burst is.
So a heat burst typically occurs with a decaying MCS. So MCS, a line of storms, it could be a cluster of storms, something of that nature. And it usually happens in the dissipating stage when reflectivities are getting, fairly light. One of the things that I found in my study is that an average reflectivity above where a burst is occurring is only about 20 dBz. So that's, pretty light when you're thinking about, other kind of convective phenomenon and things that you see on radar. So basically you have this decaying thunderstorm and it leads to air going down in the atmosphere. And if the temperature structure in the vertical in the atmosphere is a certain way, usually you need dry mid-levels to enhance evaporative cooling so that it will sink faster. You need a low-level inversion. So, of course, that means that the temperature just above the surface is actually warmer than at the surface. So that's why a lot of these happen at night. And if you get that under certain circumstances, it will actually mix that warmer air in the inversion down to the surface. And so you get a sudden, sometimes very steep increase in temperature. So that's where it gets its name, heat burst. But it also typically comes with falling relative humidities, of course, but falling dew points as well. So you get a very drying effect. And there can also be a pressure fall that's coincident with it, which of course will affect the pressure gradient and wind speeds in the area. So a lot of except for the really extreme heat bursts, say before, say the 80s and 90s, a lot of times the only reason you notice it is because you had near severe winds, because that can affect, all of a sudden you're like, there's not a typical thunderstorm, it's not raining. All of a sudden you start to see, damaging winds, really gusty, really blustery winds. Sometimes you actually get damage with these that occurs because of the rapid drop in relative humidity as well. So there has been documented instances of big damage to agriculture interests. So that was actually the first heat burst documented in at least the literature was actually back in 1909 in Cherokee, Oklahoma. So that's actually up in the northwest corner of the state. And the temperature that was reported there, if you compare it to the climatological observations, it may not have been the most accurate reading, but it actually pushed temperatures close to like 100 in the evening, well past the sun going down, and it caused agricultural damage. And of course, one last thing that heat bursts can do, unfortunately, which is another public interest thing, is there have been documented cases of wind shear with airplanes and pilots and things, which of course can have disastrous impacts. But thankfully, no disastrous impacts have occurred in that sense with any of the documented heat bursts, but it is something to consider.
You ever been in one?
Yes, I have not a severe one, but there was one that, it's like you look on the mesonet and it's like, oh, here it comes. And so you run outside so you can feel it. One of the things us meteorologists like to do is we like to experience the weather that we're interested in. So you've laid out MCS's low level temp inversion. So you're really focusing on time of year with those ingredients, at least for the Southern Plains.
Is this where they're most common? Do we know yet? Where else?
So they are definitely not just limited to the Great Plains. I will say that. In some of the documented literature, there was one in the country of Yemen. And there was also, and there was also one in, believe it or not, the United Kingdom. So both of those were actually associated with some of those wind shear pilot impacts that I noted. But the research with the Oklahoma mesonet and a lot of the cases outside of Oklahoma that I found just from researching things like public information statements, some of the like storm data and things like that, they tend to happen in the high plains region. So I know that Justin Lane, who was my colleague at Norman that I mentioned that did the climatology with the Oklahoma mesonet, he actually found that most of the heat bursts in the state of Oklahoma actually occurred in the western 2/3 of the state. So that means Norman and Amarillo's area. Although we do get them here in eastern Oklahoma. I noted the other morning one up in the far northeast corner of Oklahoma. There was one at the Miami mesonet at sometime on my mid shift a couple days ago. All of a sudden the winds, started gusting above 40 and they wouldn't stop gusting above 40, which was not kind of what we were expecting from the radar echoes that were out there. And just for giggles, I went and looked, and sure enough, there was a temperature rise and there was a pretty good, at least a notable dew point fall.
You guys have both mentioned it, but I mean, a big part of this is the mesonet. I mean, the Oklahoma mesonet makes it easier to detect these, and we really still don't know how often they're happening. I just wonder if we're going to see more of these documented with like the Kansas mesonet. And I don't know if have you seen anything about that as the mesonet spread around the country? Are we seeing more of those reported? Because you got to measure it, you got to be able to detect it to call it a heat burst. So you got to have the observations. So have you noticed any increase in any of those states with more observations?
I've noticed a lot more West Texas offices talking about them. So the West Texas mesonet has picked some up. I know there were several, at least in the last couple of convective seasons around Lubbock. I remember seeing something on social media from the Amarillo office lately that they had detected one. So definitely the thicker meso networks that we are blessed to have around here, they will pick up on more. One thing I will also mention is that you start to see more prevalence of heat bursts in the literature, like in the lit review that I did way back when. A lot of the literature that I found, before like the 90s and stuff, were actually tied to like NSSL meso networks that were set up in Oklahoma and things like that. So definitely, if you have the observations and they can detect them, then that's how we can find out, especially about some of these that maybe are a little bit more subtle, like that one I noted, up there in Ottawa County, Oklahoma the other day.
How big can they be?
So,
area and delta temp.
All right. So at least as of, the time I did my thesis, the biggest temp jump, if I'm remembering correctly, was 55 degrees Fahrenheit.
Whoa.
Yes. And the dew point fall was greater than 60 degrees. So that's going to be an extreme one, obviously. If you're talking size, there have been some heat bursts that have lasted, on the order of hours. So we're talking like 5 to 6 hours. One of the biggest ones that I can recall happened in May of 1996, and it took in roughly the whole southwestern quarter of the state of Oklahoma. And that was a damaging one. It did do, at least in 1996 dollars, did about $18 million of damage to agriculture interests in the southwest part of Oklahoma. Of course, there's a lot of, ag down there, some wheat, some cotton, things like that. And, that was during a decent part of the growing season, May. So that caused some impacts down there. That's probably the most, that one was impactful enough. And thankfully we had the mesonet, was already well underway. It had been underway for a year or two at that point. So you had a pretty dense observation network there in Southwest Oklahoma, including some of the experimental ones that, if I remember correctly, I think are in Grady County. So, they're southwest of Norman and Oklahoma City. So even a smaller increased density than what the typical mesonet has. And so that was an interesting one. And it was interesting enough that the mesonet featured it for a while in one of their, bigger case studies that they've done.
Hey, concerning the contiguous United States, what's the easternmost recorded heat burst and the northernmost recorded heat burst?
So as far as easternmost, I don't know of any, say, in your neck of the woods. I know that there have been some in eastern Oklahoma and parts of Arkansas. I do know that.
Any east of the Mississippi?
Not that I know of, but that doesn't mean that they haven't happened. I'm not aware of it. So very well could have happened over there, because obviously, like I said, you need an MCS that's decaying. And maybe in some cases not even decaying, if it has a really good descending rear inflow jet. The reason that they happen most often in the Great Plains is because the sounding that is most often associated with it, it's the slang term for it is an onion sounding. So you have like dry adiabatic temperatures in the mid levels above a temperature inversion, and you have very dry mid levels. And that type of sounding is not uncommon in the high plains. And it would be less common the further east that you get, especially down in the Gulf Coast and things like that. So while the convective mode might support it further east, I would imagine that they would be less infrequent simply because the atmospheric conditions needed to have that happen are less frequent over there.
So you're saying we get to pick one, QLCS tornadoes or heat bursts. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Can I pick heat bursts?
That's an easy choice, James.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And my CWA happens to be in the transition zone between both. So we get both. But you asked about northernmost also. I know that in my research, there were some up in the northern high plains, like Nebraska and the Dakotas. They were less frequently detected because obviously the observation network is not as dense as, say, parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas is nowadays. But occasionally they do hit one of the synoptic observations at an airport, and you can see it there.
As a matter of course, as a forecaster, you're worried about obviously the MCS, thunderstorm evolution, probably first. Does heat burst enter your mind in this case? Do you put this in an area forecast discussion? How does that work, or is that just a really cool curiosity when you see it happening or might happen?
So actually part of my research, and I had forgotten this was part of my research until I was going back and looking at things in preparation for this, but because it's kind of intuitive to me now, but I actually proposed a forecast methodology that I will say with things like the Warn-On forecast system, the HER that can now detect these at sometimes. So that's been something that we've noted in the last few years that we didn't have back when I did my thesis, that, there is an opportunity where let's use QLCS tornadoes as an example. So I know that because it can be very similar, where that there are certain weather conditions in the heat burst situation. That if a certain sounding is present, if you are expecting the right convective mode and maybe the convective evolution that would support it, once you have an inversion, set in, then hey, that might happen. And then once you start to see some of the, the convective evolution, like one of the big things that I found in my research was over 80% of the heat burst cases that I researched, they exhibited a reflectivity that looked like a snake. So I called it, in my research, I called it the serpentine echo. And so if you happen to look at, say Norman's forecast discussions, for instance, whenever one of these is happening, non-zero chance, because some of the forecasters that I worked with when I was there and that supported me in this research, they actually mention that sometimes in forecast discussions and things like that. So if you see that serpentine echo, that's where it came from.
Karen, is that sort of like you talking about something that might exhibit a bow or something like that?
It doesn't have to be a bow. Like, it literally just looks like a snake.
Okay. So
and what's funny is, while my research going through all of that radar data kind of confirmed things from a 88D standpoint, one of the earlier cases back in the 80s down in southern Oklahoma that documented some of these, they noticed that they could see kind of a thinning of the radar echo even on the 57 radars, which of course, very basic and elementary at that point. So it was something that at least in one case had been documented before. And, I found that most of the cases exhibited this on the, above the burst site. So if you can identify that and you have the right environment in place and it's the right time of day, then that kind of leads you to believe that, hey, this might be possible. And that's when you can, these days you could maybe mention it on social media, especially if you had been seeing it in Warn On Forecast or, some signals in the HER, even the RAP in some cases. So some of the small scale models, again, are starting to pick up on it. Now, one thing that is unfortunate is, in the absence of the model data, you really can't tell whether this is going to be one of those, severe wind type heat bursts or not. So unfortunately, this isn't going to tell you non-severe versus severe, but at least you'll know what is happening in case those winds start to kick up and you can look deeper into it. And
that kind of touches on one of the big challenges. It's less so now because, like you said, social media and chat, we got more ways to talk about it. But the question always was, well, what do we do with this? You don't really issue a severe thunderstorm warning, even though the winds may be severe criteria, because technically it's not that, although I've heard some people argue about that. Do you issue a high wind warning? I mean, how have you seen that evolve? And kind of what does Tulsa do, and how do you handle these? Talking about the Weather Service products wise,
I would think in most cases the wind advisory or high wind warning would probably be the way to go, because, like you said, most of them are past their convective stage. They're more kind of in that decaying MCS, and you're not. Like you said, I don't feel like it's a severe thunderstorm, but people, especially if it's going to be some of those severe level wind gusts, people need to be told. And so I feel like a short fused wind advisory, high wind warning, plus social media is probably the way to go. And I know, since you guys get it there in, Western and Central Oklahoma a lot more than we do in the eastern side of the state, I know that that's how you guys have handled it in the past. And I have zero quarrel with that. That's very appropriate.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know really how else you would do it, but now we do have chat and we can talk about it a lot more and give people kind of, reasoning for why it's happening, and, get the TV Mets and let the emergency managers know what's going on. But yeah, it's like you said, there's not a lot of, there's predictive value. You can kind of pick out cases where they may happen, but you just don't know how bad it's going to get in real time. So that's a challenge too.
Well, Rick and Karen, it seems like too that so far the ones that we've seen down here, they're more, I guess, appetite for including it in Twitter the next day, saying we did observe a heat burst at Georgetown, and we also had one northeast of Austin. So it didn't seem like it's so much predictive as it kind of is sort of a Twitter explainer the next day about something for people to have questions about it. And I wonder if, it's like Karen says, this storm in a lot of cases anyway is dissipating. If the winds, I know in all the cases down here, Karen, the ones we had in the last few months down here, the winds are in the 40 to 45 mile per hour range. And it was being dealt with in real time, probably more was just special weather statements, and from the local office. But that'll be interesting to see, because so far it just seems like it's good. It makes good clatter for Twitter at this point after the fact.
I think maybe I cannot speak to, the San Antonio, Austin office, down there, but I know that at least up here, we're pretty in tune with it.
Yeah.
And I know, like, when I saw those winds, like I said, a few mornings ago up there, I happened to look at like the Oklahoma Mesonet station plot map. And I'm like, it's a little bit warmer and just a little bit drier up there in Miami than, the ones, southwest and to the west. And so, I picked up on that, pretty quickly, especially once those, 40 to 45 mile an hour winds wouldn't die down like they typically would during, like an outflow boundary passage or something like that. And so, I think a good chunk, at least, of, my office and also the Norman office, just because of the Mesonet and, this research being out there, at least in those two offices, that it's a little bit easier to pick up in the moment and to kind of know what's going on.
Karen, one more question for you, and you kind of alluded to this being, I know our events down here back in the last couple of months have all been 10:30, 11:30, 12:30 at night and things like that. But have you seen in your research, or even Rick or James from Tulsa, have we seen these things occurring at other times of the day, or is it primarily climatologically a nighttime feature?
Climatologically, it is an evening and into the early morning hours. So it's an overnight thing, because one of the biggest things is you need that temperature inversion. And then also, typically, that's when your thunderstorm complexes are moving in and, dying most of the time. But I do recall some that occurred over in Lubbock's area in the last couple of years. I can't remember which year, it's all running together, but they actually happened after sunrise.
No.
So it's just, they are considerably less frequent.
How does this compare to, like, I'm using decaying MCS events, wake low, bubble high, things like that?
I mean, there are some similarities, because, you do have the difference in pressure that leads to the increase in, wind speeds and things like that. But with those, you don't always get the temperature rise and, the dew point fall, the drastic drop in humidity that you get. And a lot of times, with those, it's more likely it's going to be cooler and, the moisture characteristics may be a little bit different, but not vastly different. So there are definitely similarities, especially when you consider things like, when is one going to develop and when is it going to be bad? Because that doesn't always happen. So the predictability sense, there's a little bit of a similarity there as well. In the absence of some of the improvements in CAMs and Warn on Forecast and other short-term model solutions.
How about the big airports that would be kind of busy even late like that? I guess there aren't many. but you do get some overlap. DFW probably, maybe Denver. How is this communicated to pilots and air traffic control and air weather center folks?
I don't have a good answer for that, except communicating it in our products when we can. I mean, that is a very good point. Maybe if it's a situation where, you think there might be something happening, maybe the cams are showing it also, that maybe it's something to mention, from a weather service standpoint in the aviation side of the forecast discussion. That's not something that I think I've ever seen before, but maybe it's something to consider. But otherwise, yes, that is a challenge. And obviously, something that may be interesting to do that just popped into my head, but there was not a prevalence of TDWR radars, back when I did my research, and maybe, that's something new to take a look at. Or, since you mentioned DFW, they have, their CASA network down there that might provide some new insights that I didn't have just from the 88D network alone.
I could also see if the signal was strong enough and you had enough confidence. We have airport weather warnings that we issue for certain airports. I know they do one for DFW. We do one for Will Rogers. I mean, I don't think we've ever done it, but I could see a case where if this is occurring or just beginning to occur, you could pop out an airport weather warning and get at least that's mainly for the ground crews and things like that to be aware. But yeah, that's an interesting question, because other than that, I don't really know how it would be conveyed.
Well, I would want to get the CWSUs involved in that a little bit and have those people, because there's a lot of value in there. And of course, they interface closely with the WFOs, but Fort Worth and Houston Center, and Fort Worth, and we don't have as many of those center weather units, but I'm sure it's something they have a lot of territory where this does happen. So
I was actually about to say, I know anytime back when we were tertiary backup office for Fort Worth, and we used to have to, practice backing them up, we had to have good NWS chat communication with the folks at the CWSU there in Fort Worth. And so you hit the nail right on the head, that just that internal chat from the forecaster at the FO to the CWSU forecaster, that could be very valuable if in those situations where you were anticipating that potential.
Well, another thing too is that climatologically, Karen, when this thing occurs, the CWSUs are probably closing down for the night, because they have that shift at midnight where they're not there. But your commercial traffic is down a significant amount after about 11 o'clock at night. You may not know that if you go real close to DFW, but nevertheless, yeah, it's interesting.
Where do we go in the future with these? What's the advantage of developing a forecast timeline and then extending that forecast timeline and granularity?
I mean, obviously the low-hanging fruit here is trying to figure out when these things might cause damaging winds. And, even a damaging drop in relative humidity, that's, if we could anticipate that, there's not much the agriculture interests can do about their crops that are out there. But, just like we do in anticipation of widespread severe thunderstorms, and you tell people to take certain actions. I know myself, one of the things that I always do is I bring my little rolly trash can into the garage from outside, because I don't want it advected down the street. Those little things, if you can tell people that, this might happen, it's unusual, but it might damage things, versus, hey, it's just going to be an unusual thing because it's going to be 90 at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Which is not unusual for us this time of year, but some places it's a little bit more unusual. Just being able to differentiate those two, I think, is hopefully some progress that we can make. And, I know that in the last few years, the science and operations officer down at the Fort Worth office in, down there in Texas, Ted Ryan, he has done some research that's more on the model side that he took to the AMS conference a few years ago. So, starting to look at things like warn on forecast and whether it can predict it. And, other things like the HER and the RAP, some of those small scale models that we use, that maybe that's the next step.
So they're good at this, but not so good at air mass storms in Alabama.
No, none, no skills, zero.
Karen, let me ask you this too. As a female in STEM, how have you seen your environment change? This ties in with last week's show and some of the important WeatherBrains shows that we've had, just about some of the, I guess it's institutional sexism in society. Is this better now?
One thing I will say is that I have been blessed in my career where some of the things that other females in meteorology have experienced, some of the institutional things that you mentioned that I have experienced pale in comparison to some of the more extreme events. So, but one thing, I'm sure Rick remembers this, there was one time that when I was a student, I accompanied him to the Oklahoma City Fairgrounds to a Hamfest event. And he and I were staffing the booth, and there was a particular gentleman that walked up, and Rick was busy talking to somebody else. And I, approached him and I said, "Hey, can I help you?" And he said, "Nope." And he sat there and waited for about 5 minutes until Rick was done talking to the other person, walked straight up to him, stuck his hand out, and, went on to talk. And, that rubbed me the wrong way, obviously. I mean, not that I wouldn't want to talk to Rick, but, at least pretend, at least pretend, that, make small talk with me or something. But yeah, there was no interest in that whatsoever. And so, I do think that overall it is getting better because women are a little bit more willing to, stand up for ourselves, because thankfully the stigma against that is not as great as it was, say, early in my career. So I feel like all the opportunities that are available to my male counterparts are available to me. And, that's my personal, viewpoint of it and my personal feelings, on it. Others may say different, especially those that have experienced some of the more extreme institutionalized, sexism and things like that. But that's my personal experience. I have been incredibly blessed with being able to work in the 3 offices that I have. Being able to start my career in Norman was just incredible. I spent 3 years as a forecaster in the Minneapolis-St. Paul office. So that was a little bit outside my comfort zone, but again, I felt, very comfortable and learned a bunch there. And then, of course, coming back home to the other side of the state and working in Tulsa for the last 15 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a little bit, but I've been blessed to be a part of the environments that I have.
Awesome. And I know Rick wants to pivot. I think that's all I have about heat burst. You filled my brain up, which is, don't brag about that. But yeah, this is cool stuff. And it's fun to see Steve Pilch, the MIC here at the Tulsa Weather Service office, always gets on Twitter, not always, but often gets on Twitter looking a little heat bursty over around so-and-so. And that always makes me crack up a little bit. But I know Rick has an idea. He wants to talk about another topic as we have officially started with National Weather Service Chat version 2.0. So that's not the topic, but it is here.
It will be in a minute, but
okay.
Before we get to that, I don't know how much Troy's got me nervous about what he's going to talk about.
He always has us nervous.
No, it'll be fine. We're all friends here. Now, Karen, I know you remember back in February, we were at the Oklahoma Emergency Management Conference in Durant, and I remember, I think I came on the show that Monday night and talked a little bit about our experience there, but kind of talk about what happened there back on February 26th, 27th. You and I and Vivek and Michael and I forget Charlie, who else was there. To me, that was a fascinating experience. In all my years in the Weather Service, I'd never gotten to experience decision support services like that. So we can both talk about it, but kind of set the stage for that and what went on there, because it was kind of a unique deal.
So I have to say that being a part of that was one of the neatest work experiences I have ever had. Unfortunately, there were some not so good things that happened that night from the weather standpoint, but being able to work side by side with the people, the emergency managers in my area, and being able to see the work that Rick and Vivek did with their emergency managers that night, there's nothing like sitting side by side, giving them information, getting information from them immediately, like without any kind of, translation issues. You don't have to worry about somebody calling. They can feed that information right to you, and you can feed that information to them. Just that real-time feedback is incredible. So all that being said, some very brief background about how this started. The Oklahoma Emergency Management Conference is typically held in like February or March of every year. And of course, the weather diversity that you have across the state of Oklahoma, you could have anything from fires to severe weather to, winter weather during that time frame. And not this year's conference, but the conference before last, there was another severe weather event and high-end fire weather event that occurred during that. And so I know that Steve Piltz, my MIC, Rick, I'm sure you were involved with that as well. Basically, there was an impromptu emergency operations center that spun up at the conference due to those weather events. And that kind of led to the idea that the association president, who is an EM on my side of the state, he thought that we should have a more formalized EOC at the conference, since, all the states' EMs are there, and, that would be staffed with an NWS presence. And Steve Piltz, my MIC, he was like, so do you want to take it and run with it? And I said I said yes without thinking twice at all. So I worked with Rick and Vivek to figure out, things like who was going to staff the EOC when, how long the shifts would be, what we would do in the form of pre-conference briefings and things like that. Initially, the EOC was not supposed to spin up on that Sunday before the conference. It was just supposed to be a Monday through Wednesday operation. But when the Storm Prediction Center drops a moderate risk for severe weather on you and is talking about, wind speeds 90 to 100 miles an hour with squall line coming through, obviously a very dynamic system, then you spin up the EOC early. And so we got things going on Sunday evening, and it was a really interesting experience where some of the challenges were, all the EMs wanted to be in the EOC, but you didn't want all the EMs in there, at that time. So there was almost like okay, the storms are getting to you. You can come in and talk. The storms are getting to you. You can come in and ask questions.
It was like a doctor's office. I described it like Pottawatomie County. You can come on in. You're next on the parade of damage. So yeah, it's funny.
So yeah, I got, of course, the big event that happened that night. There was a significant tornado that actually moved through Norman, and I can let Rick talk about, his and Vivek's experience, but, I got to sit there and see exactly what they did with the Norman EM right there, beside them. And I'll let Rick chime in on that rather than speaking for him.
No, it was, I've been in the Weather Service a while, and that was one of the coolest, most eye-opening experiences. I wish everybody could go through it. But yeah, we didn't plan to be there on Sunday evening. Watching the EM spin this thing up was amazing, just how quickly they were able to set up. And this is not just a laptop and, a couple of phones. This is like a first class. James, you visited there, and the monitors and everything they had set up, radios, it was the legit alternate state EOC. And it was interesting because we were getting to brief the individual emergency managers as storms would come in. Like Karen said, we couldn't let everybody in, but they would actually bring people in. And one of the weirdest things was this was in the conference was in the conference center of the Choctaw Casino down in Durant, literally just off the casino. And the room that they had the EOC in was like this glassed, and I'm not sure what it was used for usually, but it was the perfect spot for this EOC. And then right outside the where the EOC was, they had chairs, tables, round tables set up. There was a cash bar over to the side somewhere over there. And whoever wasn't in the EOC, there was EMs, like an audience of EMs out there, watching monitors and waiting for their turn to come in. It's the craziest thing, but it was the coolest thing. And of course, one of the decision support services we were providing is some EMs who didn't have enough people back home to cover the event, or for whatever reason, we were having to tell them how much time they had to get home. Okay, the EM from Garfield County, let's just say, I don't think this was a real incident, but how much do I have time to get home before the storm? So that was a real thing that Karen dealt with. I know we dealt with as well. But yeah, and being there, briefing the emergency managers. Of course, we're not in our office. We're not able to communicate. So we're getting to experience the event like a partner, like someone who's not in our office, who can't hear all the discussions. So the dependence on NWS chat that we had was huge. And Karen probably heard me mumbling and cursing or whatever else about, you just don't know how badly you need that information. James, you do, because you're standing talking to all those people all the time with bright lights on you. But that's all we had, really. We had our analysis, but you don't want to go outside of what the office is doing. So anyway, that was pretty fascinating. And then we had our internal chat. So we're interacting with the EMs. They're giving us reports. We're sending those through our internal chat. We're asking them, are you going to... Oklahoma City emergency managers coming to us and saying, we need to know now if you're going to extend that polygon because we need to know about the sirens. And so we're not in the office. We can't see the face of the warning forecaster. So we're having to do what emergency managers do and get in chat and say, hey, what's up? Are you going to extend this warning? Anyway, it was stressful. It was fascinating, but having the Norman emergency manager there and being able to brief him, I think even before we issued the tornado warning, just a little bit of lead time to let him know. And he was very, just spreading the praise around pretty thick the next day about how much of a difference that made for him, because he was communicating back to the office. So, but we did that with more. We did that with lots of different emergency managers. And then knowing that, the tornado was it ended up being about 0.4 of a mile from our building. And just knowing all that was going on, and people in our internal chat saying, our ears are popping. And I don't know, it was the coolest thing to be down there. It was weird not being in the office. It felt so weird driving away from the office on a day like that, but I wouldn't trade it for the world now. I mean, the office handled it great, but yeah, it was amazing. And then it just continued on and into the next day even.
One of the things that I think was super interesting, and you kind of alluded to it, where in that instance, we are we are customers of our own information. Now, we are advanced users of our own information, but having that experience and knowing what I needed there to support my EMs I can take that back to the office, and I have taken it back to the office and told people, hey, this is what was helpful to me to help them. And, I try to keep that in mind whenever I interact on NWS chat and things like that, because that was information that, would have been valuable to me or was valuable to me. And so I keep that in mind and I pass it along. So that was something that was really interesting from my standpoint. And, just like Rick said, he got, the Norman EM was singing the praises and all that. I got several of my EMs that came in and said the same thing. And the man who was in charge, the emergency manager that was basically in charge of the EOC organization from the Emergency Management Association side, he came up to me the next day and he's like, you want to be in my EOC every severe weather event? And I know that wasn't just because he wasn't asking me. He felt that the interaction and having a meteorologist at his, disposal, for lack of a better way to say it, to ask whatever he needed, he saw the utility in that. So it led to other discussions. Like, I know the southeast corner of the state, there's some increased like video chats during severe weather and things like that may become a little bit more frequent, that we may have to figure out how to do that. But they've found a way to make technology stand in for, an actual physical presence there.
Yeah, and another cool thing is just like, well, it wasn't cool for Shawnee, but Shawnee got hit by a tornado in the Pottawatomie County, and Shawnee emergency managers were there, and someone at the office drew a preliminary tornado track, and just sitting down shoulder to shoulder, side by side with them and showing them the track. They're on the phone with the sheriff's office and people back home, and they're giving us instant ground truth verification. Yep, there's damage here. Just really amazing. And then, the state emergency management was in there, and they were coordinating things from a state level, making sure they had all the reports. And I don't know, it's just amazing. And then I got to come home. My MIC called me late that night and said, we need you here for damage surveys. So I got up at 5 a.m. that Monday and drove back to Norman and helped with surveys. And it was the Norman tornado. We had quite a bit to survey. And then, but it continued on. We were in the OC, I think, until Wednesday, and it was even after the severe weather was over, there was a lot going on in there. And we heard the same comment, Karen, that, EMs are going to be like, this is the greatest thing in the world, and how can we make this happen for every severe weather event? So yeah, we're going to need cloning technology or something, but Karen put it all together and working with EMs in her area, and there was another forecaster from Tulsa, Michael Boland, that was there, and Charlie Woodruff from Shreveport showed up. So it was a team effort. But I know Karen's going to be talking about this a little bit at the NWA meeting, and I don't know. It was just a cool experience. You couldn't have planned it any better for the experience. But I don't know, Karen, you got any other thoughts on it? Or I appreciate you putting it together, because it ended up working out really well.
There were a few, takeaways and stuff, and I don't want to totally give away my NWA presentation, but or my showcase presentation. But one of the things that I think it was very transparent, like the EM community could not tell this, but one of the things that was new for us was getting the 4 offices that cover the state of Oklahoma to collaborate on, say, one briefing package. And some of that there were some hiccups with that. It ended up working. The EMs could not tell that, but there are some ideas for collaboration, not only beforehand, but for, ways to get the information that we need while the EOC is in operation. Fire weather is a big one that I can think of, because we were not privy to, say, the hotspot notifications from anyone outside of our own office. And so that's kind of an action item for the next one, because fire weather is a big thing in, February and March in Oklahoma. And typically, And so, we need to know that so we could brief the EMs instead of being reactive to it. And I felt like, at least during my time, during the fire weather portion of the active weather, I didn't always have that information right at hand. And so, there were a few kind of internal takeaways that were very valuable to learn that, hopefully we'll do better next time.
But there was many moments where you had those, an emergency manager would come up and ask you a very basic and legitimate question. How come all the hotspot notifications are in areas where there is no red flag warning? And you're like, that is a good question, and it really gives you a new perspective on things, and it really makes you look. I mean, we're so involved in what we do, and we're so geeked out on the weather, and we come to work every day, and that's what we do. To get a chance to step back and see it from somebody else's perspective is just priceless. So yeah, there were some little takeaways like that for sure that we took back. And we also went back to the office and did an after action review and kind of shared some honest feedback from our side. It's like, this is, it's one thing to have an EM ask you something in chat or on the phone, but when they're standing right there and they're telling you, I need to know right now about activating these sirens for hundreds of thousands of people, it's like, it's a whole different feeling. So we some good came out of it for sure. We learned from it. And I know I'm more appreciative, and the forecasters are probably getting sick of hearing me and Vivek talk about it because of the experience, but it was nothing but positive, I think.
I know one thing that Michael Bolin, that Rick has mentioned, that's a forecaster in my office. He was there during one of the big fire weather days, and I asked him for his feedback because basically I put together a lessons learned blog, basically, and to provide, this is what I learned from the EMs, maybe these are ideas that we could do better next time, all those sorts of things. And that experience, I know Michael came back and he said, I get some of it now, like some of the DSS stuff and, why EMs need certain things and things like that, that even someone who was interested in that side of things, he didn't fully grasp how important certain things were until going through that experience. So it was a good experience all the way around. And I think it helped save people.
All right. Who wants to pivot to talk about chat? Troy.
Well, I just, I kind of want to get a feel for, everybody and what they thought the transition was like. I'm old and I'm used to NWS Chat 1.0. But, I really think that the transition itself on the 1st of August really went pretty smoothly. When it came down to it, I do believe that there were some, I don't know what I want, but I still got a NWS Chat 1.0 down there because I like to watch products coming in, the one line. That's the one thing so I think the bot has got to get a little more work done. That's a little before. I think that was something that maybe we didn't consider as much.
You got about 12 more hours of that, Troy.
What's that?
Yay.
You got about 12 more hours of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
So-
my
1.0.
Okay. I know I want to see.
Oh, you're saying I have 12 more hours of that and it's going to stop?
Yeah. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
Breaking news.
Troy. We'll send you
Well,
a
here we
card.
go. Let me tell you this. I find this interesting. There are still 8 people in Austin, San Antonio. There are 6 people in San Angelo, Fort Worth, 15 people, by the way, largely all EMs. Norman, you got 14 people in there right now. At Shreveport, we got 10. Houston, you got 9. So there's still some laggards like myself. So
We had somebody do the ping pong thing in our room this morning. The old
really?
room. So, yeah.
I mean, in a way, I'm glad it was pushed out, even not fully polished up, because I think that speeds the timeline and the urgency of
it does. Yeah.
cleaning things up a little bit. I'm overjoyed, man. This thing's got so much potential.
Well, let me just say this. I'm probably biased because I've been using Slack
You've been using
for a long time. And kind of got the weather service in Birmingham hooked on it. And, they actually used it during some severe weather events 2 years ago, and they got in big trouble.
Yep.
Because we basically had no communication with the weather service, none. It was in, listen, this is a life-death situation. These were springtime tornado events, and we couldn't communicate. And I told those guys in Birmingham, look, if you get in trouble, I'll go to bat for you. I mean, whatever it takes. I mean, this is ridiculous. We got to do something here. So, and I know some people are a little agitated because it takes a little getting used to, and there's so many different rooms and options, and there's a learning curve.
Yeah.
And anytime there's something new, there's a learning curve. But the bottom line is it's stable. That's the most important thing. It is a stable platform. Could it go down? Absolutely. Come on. But it's stable. I cannot recall a time, and I've been using it for probably at least 8 years, where we had an issue with it in terms of downtime. So when I bring it up, it's there. And it's so refreshing to see people actually sharing video. The emergency managers are showing video and images of damage. And we need to see this, and we can all share this on the air. We are not competing. We are in it together as a team. And I think we've been through so much here. We've had so many convective events since it opened up. It seems like everybody's pretty happy here. Again, I've not heard that many gripes about it so far. So I'm delighted. And for me, just having a couple of windows with the session we have for our own people, our spotters, and the weather service chat, those 2 windows, it's just magic. I love it.
Troy, you brought it up. What's been your experience? I mean, the bot is clearly something that's not there yet. Yeah. And for those listening, watching who don't know what we're talking about, one of the features in this internal NWS chat is an automated feed of products. It gets dropped automatically into what's formerly known as chat rooms, now channels. We kind of all got used to the bot as it was in the old chat, but the new chat, it was not. They're wanting to get that transition going, thanks to Ken Graham really pushing, and thank goodness for that. But the bot's not quite there yet, and I think that's probably, if there's been any shortcomings or things that people have kind of wished worked better, that's it. Has that been your experience, Troy?
Well,
anybody?
And I guess I've got to learn a little more about the platform. I went to a couple of the sessions, Karen and Rick, and that we had online. The Weather Service did a great job, and the people at Slack with being able to communicate what it's all about. But I need to understand more about the multiple. I want to have more of the multiple offices up at one time, and my understanding there's a way to do that, but Troy just hasn't learned that yet. So,
that I've learned a couple of things. The things that people are complaining about or that they've missed are things that I never realized were that important to people. Like there's a thing called All Talk. I think that's what you're talking about. And Karen, I don't know if you were there when I had this light bulb go off over my head, but when we were in Durant, they had monitors up at the front of the room, and they had it set up so that all the chat from Tulsa, Amarillo, Shreveport, and Norman were all in one feed. And I had never figured out that's what that was there for, this All Talk feature where you could merge all these rooms together.
Yeah.
We don't have that now in Slack. And I see the utility of that, though, for TV people, for statewide people. So, I know that's one of the things there's a list of things that they're working on it. And this is a small team of people that's working on this, and they're working their tail ends off, I know. And I appreciate everything they've done, but you throw it out there, and I think the last time I looked, there had been like 14,000 people 14,000 registered users, probably including Weather Service. And that's probably higher now, but I mean, there's going to be some learning for sure.
Yeah. And that's primarily what it's been with me. I kept waiting if we were getting closer to August 1st about whether it would happen, but I'm glad it did as well. and we've kept it going. The old one kind of in place for another 8 or 9 days, 8 days. So, yeah, and I just got to learn a little more about, how you pull up different windows, and I have all my offices selected, but I'd like to see a little more in one place.
The only issue I've seen, some of the EMs will post damage photographs or video of flooding, and the same thing that you see on the X and the face bag and all this stuff. Hello, I'm with Fox Weather. I need you to fill out this authorization form. We'd like to use your video and of images on all platforms. Would you please, how they do that? And
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that's the right place for these guys to be doing that. That clogs up the channel. I don't think that's appropriate. That's just my opinion. But I've seen Fox Weather, the Weather Channel. Hello, I'm with ABC News in New York. Would you fill out this, consent form? Blah 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 blah. I don't like that.
I agree.
That's just my opinion. But apparently, they got creepers from the national organizations like that hanging out in every Slack room or group there for Weather Service offices. And again, I understand that and I've said this before. I don't mind if anybody uses what I post over there. I don't care if the guy across the street uses it on the other channel. We're trying to do the same thing. And if there's some super duper, hot photograph or video that I have that doesn't, it's not critical, if I need to hold it for us, I'll hold it for us. But anyway, I don't think you guys have had much weather. Troy, you've had no weather with it yet. None.
How would you define that word, weather?
Sunny and 108.
Yeah, there we go. That's a beautiful day.
Rick, have you had any active weather with 2.0 so far? And Karen, the same for you in Tulsa?
We've had a little bit. We issued some warnings last night with it, and we haven't had a lot. But yeah, just we've been trying to get our partners to use it and practice with it, and we're doing things a little bit different than some offices. Like we have a whole separate channel just for pictures where we want people to post. I don't think any other office is doing that now, and I don't know if we'll continue doing it. We're testing it. So we've gotten to try it out with a little bit of weather. Another thing that's different is we're able to kind of, like we've done it. I don't know who else. I think a lot of offices have done it where we can split off the bot messages. So in the main channel, we're only putting like tornado, severe thunderstorm, flash flood warnings, and then there's a separate data feed channel that has all the stuff. That's something else we're kind of experimenting with. Karen, I don't know what y'all are doing or what your experience has been, if you've gotten any feedback on any of that yet. But we haven't had a lot of weather to really try it out with. But yeah, have y'all, Karen, used it much?
I've used it the last few mids. I love the ability to put images in there. So anytime that I do like a radar, like a short-term forecast, animated GIF, however you say it, I have taken to loading that into Slack because it is just so much easier to do that than try to explain in words like we used to have to. And, I love the ability to just react to somebody's information as opposed to having to type out to them. One of the funnier things that I have noticed regarding the bot, because we do have something very similar to what Norman does, where we have a data feed channel, and then the most important products go in our main channel. Well, a lot of those main products from SPC have the identifier, like part of the identifier is SWO, Severe Weather Outlook, which also happens to be the 3-letter identifier for Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is just west of, my CWA. Yet the aviation forecast for Stillwater is appearing in my channel because it says TAF SWO. So there's still some issues, like you said, with the bot, but that's probably the funniest bot hiccup that I've noticed now.
And I was looking at Birmingham. They've got a data feed channel where it's just the bot. That's all that is. And it looks like in their main channel, the only bot stuff we get are the actual warnings. And I've got to work on it.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's where we go with it. I've talked to some WCMs about it, a couple of people, and it's just going to take a little bit to get readjusted. But I don't know.
Yeah, just give it time. And I've got to work on my internal Slack channel for the spotters here. We used to use weather message software. Brian Peters has it running at his house. He has a Twitter account. It would send it out to the eWarn Twitter feed, and it would go right into Slack, and just within seconds you'd get the warnings. Where with the X and all those changes in the tweeter, that kind of is going away for now. So I've got if this then that, doing a data pull from an XML file, and it only pulls the data like once every 4 minutes, so the warnings could be 4 minutes delayed. And the other problem, I'm getting all these heat things. Goodness, I mean, it's like heat. I mean, and that's a topic for another day, but after a while that gets on my nerves. I mean, we're getting these heat emergencies on days where temperatures here are below average, and so something has clearly changed in that deal, and that we need to talk about that sometime. I've talked with some others internally that are afraid to say anything about it, but I have lived through heat emergencies, including the one in 1980. Troy, you were around in 1980.
Yep.
And I'm afraid people are just getting desensitized because every day it's a heat emergency. And we've seen these things where temperatures are below average, but it clogs up that Slack channel that I've got for us. And I need to work on that. But anyway, I think it's going to be great. But we have to pause for a moment. And obviously, Jen is out. And the deal is Jen is down here doing some research in Alabama this week. In fact, we're going to have a confab, a little gathering tomorrow evening, which will be a lot of fun. But we'll do the email segment next week. We're going to do Tony Rice and the Astronomy Report. We're going to have Jen's This Week in Tornado History. We'll come back with the Weather Roundup, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
The Perseid meteor shower peaks this weekend, and it's one of the 3 most active meteor showers of the year. But this one has the benefit over December's Geminids or January's Quadranids of peaking at a time where you don't have to bundle up to see them. Nearly every article on the Perseids mentions the number 100 when discussing how many meteors might be seen. And some use the only slightly more accurate phrase, up to 100. The reality is, most of us won't see nearly that many. That century number comes from the zenith hourly rate, or ZHR. This is a handicapping system of sorts used to correlate reports of meteor activity from around the world. That zenith part means it's being calculated on the radiant or point in the sky where the meteors appear to be coming from, being directly overhead, something that's only possible to happen at one latitude, and only for a brief time. ZHR also mathematically eliminates light pollution and clouds, the real enemy of seeing the most meteors. All that being said, though, the Perseids are definitely worth going out to see. And to see the most, look to the darkest part of the sky. Meteors can appear anywhere, not just around that radiant point. And those hours before sunrise, those are the best because the radiant point is in the highest point in the sky. And that hides the fewest meteors below the horizon. But above all, be patient. The longer you look, the more you'll see. You'll also be amazed how many more stars you'll see just after 15 minutes of letting your eyes adjust to the darkness. And on that, leave that phone inside. Each time you look to a light, the 15-minute timer starts over. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, August 12th, 1974. A destructive tornado crossed 7 miles through parts of Delaware County, Iowa, striking the southern parts of Ryan. It was given a rating of F4. A total of 44 homes were hit, 20 of which were destroyed. The West Delaware Grade School, St. Patrick's Catholic Church, and several other businesses were also demolished. There was a total of 12 injuries and no one was killed. Newspapers reported that receipts from a home in Ryan ended up in Galena, Illinois, over 60 miles away. I was encouraged to write a summary about this event by a resident of Ryan. Helen Liness sent me an email providing scanned photos of the tornado, newspaper clips, and personal stories. Helen's son was born a week early, 2 days after the tornado missed their home in Ryan by 4 blocks. The tornado developed on her father-in-law's farm. Helen wrote in the email that over 45 years later, quote, "All that is still standing of the farm buildings are the house and the shed that was built to replace the barn. We are happy to report that our daughter and her husband bought the farmhouse and acreage and are raising their family in the house built by her great-grandparents. Check out our website for the full summary about this event and hundreds more at tornadotalk.com.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
So we're going to do a weather roundup here. This is for Monday, the 7th of August. Tropical update, Troy? Nothing.
No, it's very, very quiet. Said to be the ocean is practically boiling out there, at least in some cases. It's not, but it's just the air is too dry over at least chunks of the Atlantic. We've had some Saharan dust as well. While the sea surface temperatures would be favorable, the atmosphere itself apparently is not that much.
Seems
so
like El Nino's doing it's thing.
Yep. So we're going to see how that goes. And the only good thing is that, our peak temperature, I think like most everyone's on the show tonight, our peak temperature is usually this week into next week. I'm hoping I don't see a break in this pattern, by the way. Even the longer range outlooks are not very helpful into the end of August into early September to Labor Day. Sorry about that, but we'll see what ends up happening. At some point, the ridge must die. So we'll see.
Show title.
Yep.
The ridge must die.
Yep.
No, at some point it's going to break. So let's go up to Oklahoma. Goodness, we got a big Oklahoma contingent on the show tonight. Rick, we'll start with you. What's the word there?
Well, not quite as doom and gloom as down in the Austin, San Antonio area. We only got up to 84 degrees today. We had some big complex of thunderstorms. I'm sorry, a big complex of storms over northern Oklahoma, and the clouds just hung around. And yeah, so it was a welcome break. Summer up here has really not been horrible. We've had extended bouts of 100 degrees plus, but we're kind of on the fringes of this northwest flow again, it looks like, and going to get some, MCS activity maybe as, it was May and June, then it was June and July. Now it's June and August. I mean, it's just a weird pattern up here, kind of not deep under the ridge there, but kind of keeps the weather a little bit interesting and not quite as horribly hot as it could be.
Well, one thing here too, Rick, and James in Tulsa, and James Spann and Karen up in Tulsa, the last few days have really scared me a lot because we're getting a lot. I just got brand new notice where I'm on the email list for the Texas Division of Emergency Management, and all the wildfires we're now chasing down here. And we have a major one that destroyed at least one home down in Hays County, south of Austin, down towards San Marcos, Kyle, Butte area over the weekend. And that one's still not totally contained yet. And it's not unusual to see pictures when you can get, I'm not at a good vantage point here, but you'll see smoke on the horizon. There was a lot of it on the horizon to the south because it was coming back northward. And this is what really scares me, because this lawn out here is dead. I'm not going to sit here and pay the city of Austin water rates to keep this one watered. So I'm letting it go. But it's really, really bad.
How's the power grid doing, Troy?
The power grid seems to be doing pretty well. I think our friends at ERCOT have really maybe made some improvements. I'm not totally convinced of yet. I want to see what happens during the winter when we get a winter storm in here. And I'm worried about this next winter. It'd just be just like it.
Solar has worked this summer for Texas.
Yeah,
doesn't work real well in the winter.
Yep. So we're going to keep an eye on it, but thankfully 20 feet that way, whole house gas generator.
Wow. Yeah. All right, James A., give us the news in Tulsa town.
The weather ball is red.
Red
weather is ahead, but not hot. And I do win my station's award for the best time vacation by being in California with low humidity and temps in the 70s, while it was 105 2 days in a row up here. But yeah, pretty quiet. Same as Rick, kind of on the edge of the ridge, and no sign really over the next 10 days that we're going to be pushing 100. So that is a huge victory. But getting up the morning after arriving from California to mow my yard was a shock to the system.
Ooh, I bet. Goodness gracious. But you were going, what, 10 days?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think I saw a dew point above 53.
So, Karen, what's the winter going to be like in Oklahoma?
Yeah, Karen.
Have to wait and see.
No, that's not a good answer.
Love it, go. Way to go, Karen.
Come on.
We got a 45-day outlook, right?
45.
I'm going to be honest. I have not looked at the long range outlook yet. I've been fixated on the MCS activity and the hot temperatures here.
Now, I got a question. This might be a stupid question, but I got a question. We're all friends here. So when did MCC become MCS? Who made that change and why? Now, some of us are old enough to remember when it was an MCC, and some pinhead decided it needs to be an MCS. Does anybody know the story behind this?
System versus complex?
Yeah,
Complexes
that's all.
Bigger, right? Or complices? Wait,
I think it has to do with size, but I'm not sure exactly.
See, nobody knows. Somebody knows, but they're not going to say. So we don't know who made that change. Like, and
complex just sounded too complicated. I don't know. The system just. I have no idea. That's a great question.
I thought complexes were bigger, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
And then, when I was a young man doing this, we had squall lines. We had a squall line. Some pinhead decided, no squall line. It's going to be a quasi-linear convective system, a QLCS. Who did that? Does anybody have the answer to that?
Looks good in AMS paper, James. Looks good in AMS paper.
Oh, gosh. Does anybody know?
It uses more fingers when you type it, I guess. I'm not sure. And you get to work a Q in there. How often do you get to use the letter Q in weather?
Yeah.
That's true. Well, all right. That does it for me. All right. Well, let's move on to picks of the week. This is where we all go around the horn and share something very cool that is weather related. And Karen, we're going to let you go last, so you'll have time to come up with something good here. So let's just start with James Adelot in Tulsa. James, give us a good pick of the week. Go.
Mine is my tweet I just shot out at about 7:00 of a couple of pictures from Lassen Volcanic National Park, which was about half of it burned in the Dixie Fire of 2021. But wildflowers, the undergrowth is really starting to come back. The ranger there at the station told me within 10 years, it'll be indistinguishable other than the height of the trees. But a lot of recovery is still going on in the California national parks from the winter with all the snow and, of course, the wildfires that have happened. And also Sequoia National Park, they've said the fires from 2020, 21, 22 have killed as many as 15% of the sequoias in all the groves, which is kind of horrifying because that is a very small geographical footprint that sequoias can grow to that enormous height in. And the last, and I'll tweet it a little later too, my daughter threw a snowball at me because there is tons of snow still on the ground out there in Lassen, and she absolutely bullseyed my camera lens. It's impressive. So I'll get that one out too.
So my pick, it's y'all might, I don't want to mispronounce his name, Tomer Berg. Do y'all know him? He's a PhD student, I think at OU. And he's got an amazing real-time tropical cyclone page that's really, really good. And there's a lot of good tropical pages, but I'm just saying this is really well done. And so at some point, we're going to have tropical activity. At some point, it's going to pick up. So you might want to give that a shot as you kind of get your tropical tabs ready for the tropical seasons. That'll be my pick of the week. And again, all the links will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. All right, Rick, give us something good.
Mine's also in the tropical vein. I think I may have done this one in years past, but the Hurricane Center has a nice list of the 6-year cycle of tropical cyclone names for the Atlantic. And Eastern Pacific basins, complete with a pronunciation guide. So once we get into those storms and you need to know what name is next, or has your favorite name been retired, that's kind of a source. So they keep that updated, and it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of a good reference to have.
Excellent. Great. All right, Troy, go.
Well, I'm borrowed from our listener viewer, Jay Farlow. He sent along an article which I had not seen, but it was an article in Time magazine recently that kind of went through and graded, if you will, the different weather apps that are out there. And so I didn't have any problem with the way Time magazine did it, but one thing I'm going to tell you now, and I'm hoping everyone that listens or watches us here in WeatherBrains knows this. I'll tell you my favorite app, and I call it an app, is to go to the National Weather Service page, go down to the little topographic map that's just part of the website, pick you out a place. You can do it pretty exactly. We call it the point and click. We in the jokester world, we call it the point and cringe. But the bottom line is it's there, and you can save that on your phone, and save it to the home screen, I think is what you do on an iPhone or something like that. You save it as that, and guess what? It quacks like a duck, and it walks like a duck, and it acts like an app. And with that being said, I will tell you it's interesting, because I don't think Karen or Rick want to probably get into this too much, but the partner meetings a couple of weeks ago that Ken held out of headquarters, very good meeting. I think it was toward the end of July. That's where I posed the question to him about the app, and it was pretty straightforward with everybody. And Ken told us in that partner meeting that the people that he gets the biggest number of questions about why isn't their weather service app are people in the field, the WFOs. He says that's where he gets a lot of it, is from out here asking why. My response to that, and I've made my case very clear, I love the private sector partners, AccuWeather. I love all those folks. I don't have a problem in the world with them. But I can tell you, we can create an app that serves the mission of the National Weather Service, watch warnings and advisories. Advisories a little dying pretty soon, I guess, in a couple of years. But watch warnings, advisories through an app. And I think we could do that and not violate the nature of that contract that was put together in the 1990s, and still be able to get watch warnings and advisories out. So I'm hoping, and everyone listened in that partner meeting, and I think there had some feedback from people on it. But don't forget the National Weather Service. Go back there and grab one, because where else do you have? No offense to all the 5 apps that they named. AccuWeather is one of them, and they have people there 24 hours a day. But a lot of these things are model driven and probably don't get a whole lot of human eyes on them. I can tell you what the National Weather Service does 24 hours a day, 365 days a year from all their local offices, and they update this thing. So if you really want a good forecast, create your own app by going to the homepage, pick you out a place in that topographic map on your phone or your iPad, and save to the home screen. And at that point, you have a little thing that looks like an app, and it'll give you a forecast whenever you hit it directly, a text forecast.
I say that often, that your browser is your best friend. Your browser is your best friend.
Yep.
But yeah, this apps, I just got a note here a few minutes ago. I've been a fan for many years, and I'm not sure how to say this because I'm no longer following you and taking your advice. My problem, it's your app. It's always wrong. I live in Cottondale, and I'm not complaining because we didn't get a storm or rain, but how can I count on you as I always have? Your app is always wrong. And so what this lady has, it's the station app, which is, pure computer model data. We don't touch it. And we don't have any skills or limited skill set in dealing with summer convection.
Yeah.
And, that's the problem we're all fighting here. So no, preach on, brother. Preach on.
Yeah.
All right. So, Karen, Do you get tired of the Karen thing, by the way? My wife's name is Karen, and she gets real tired of it. Do you get tired of that?
I try to get ahead of it by making the jokes first. But sometimes the low-hanging fruit from people is the Hatfield and McCoy thing, though. So I get it from both sides there.
And my wife's done with it. She's changed her name on social media to Katie or just Kay. She's done with it. So anyway, Karen, give us a good pick of the week. Go.
So I'm going to go full on nerd here because probably the coolest thing that I saw on Twitter recently was from Dr. Robin Tanamachi, who was a former classmate of mine at OU during graduate school. She has tweeted out a really good radar loop from Saturday morning of an undulate borer that came across northern and central Oklahoma and into eastern Oklahoma and was pretty prolific at generating thunderstorms on the front edge of it. So something that was really cool about that was when I left the office at about 7:45 that morning, the storms were just hitting Tulsa at that point, and you could kind of see in the clouds on the leading edge the reflection of, the different rotors associated with that. So that's probably the coolest thing I've seen on Twitter.
Or X.
Whatever we call it these days. Yes, sorry.
By the way, just between us, I got an email from X here a few minutes ago. This is the first time I've ever gotten an email from X. And I must confess a horrible sin here. This is bad. I mean, I'm embarrassed. So, and one of our news anchors is really mad at me because I've worked with this lady for a long, long time, and she's mad at me. But I paid Elon Musk the $8 for his what do you call it? Blue X Blue, whatever, $8. And this is a gamble. Just I'm playing with it to see. But in order to sign up for his monetization program, you got to pay the $8. So I'm going to gamble $8, and maybe I'll make 10. If I make $2 profit, it's a win. And you do get to make longer tweets or whatever they call it. You don't have the same limit, and you can use Tweet Deck. And, some other advantages. But at first I said I would never, ever do this. Never. I wouldn't give this guy a stinking dime. But I started seeing some of the payouts here for this, revenue share thing. I'm thinking, now, wait a minute here. So I just got an email from X. And let me give you the exact text of this email here. This is really fascinating. So it says, hey, Span, 85.15240,514 has been deposited into your account from X Ads revenue sharing. Now let's review this. 85.15240514. I would assume this is $85.15. But that's bizarre. So if this is true, my calculated $8 gamble is paid off. I wound up with over $75 from this guy. So, and when I was a kid, I could never, ever imagine having $85. So
there is no denomination listed next to this money trail that you shared with us.
No,
85 no cents or dollars or
no, it's just it's got a dollar sign out in front of it. So yes, it's got $85. $85 .15240,514. Anyway, all right. So let's see, Karen. Are you on the socials at all? If somebody wants to follow you or get in touch with you, and if you're not, that's cool too. Dr. Neil Jacobs is not, and he's the happiest man on this show.
Yep.
I am on X, so my handle is at KA Hatfield, so pretty easy to remember. And I am welcome to anybody who wants to follow me, but fair warning, there is a heavy dose of University of Oklahoma sports on there, in addition to some Celtics tweets and some cool weather pictures. So you get a healthy mix.
What's the deal with the Celtics? I don't get it.
All right. So I'm married into that. My husband has been, I don't know how, but he has been a Celtics fan since the mid 80s. And during our dating was when they won their last NBA championship.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, I know, Mr. Lakers, Warriors, whatever. But I basically didn't have a team, but I liked basketball and I started watching it. And I fell in love with a certain Oklahoma State player who just got traded to Memphis. So that's how that started.
Okay. Is he a Red Sox guy?
Not too much into baseball. It's just,
oh gosh,
come
on.
Just the Celtics. He doesn't even watch NFL. Like I watch NFL. I've been a Cowboys fan since I was knee high to a grasshopper. So
before we go, I got to ask you about your high school basketball career. But because, James introduced you with this great buildup about your high school basketball career, and then nothing. We heard nothing about it. So what position did you play?
Well, I am 5 foot even, so I was a point guard. And James, may have been a little hyperbolic on my high school basketball career, but I could pass the ball. That's what the point guard should.
So you stood out there 30 feet out and you just shot and dished out the ball to the people on the inside, right?
For the most part, because the one time that I ventured to go in with the taller players, I got a tooth dislocated. So I learned to not do that anymore.
No, it's horrible. I love basketball, but I was a stump. I was a short guy. And I'd go in there and their elbows would catch my nose. I mean, literally my nose would be at some type of angle after I would go in there. I'm thinking, this thing's going to fall off. So, during and I never played, high school basketball, but I just sat out there and shot from 30, 35 feet out. And now I'm a good horse player. I mean, I'm just saying that's about the only kind of basketball I can play is horse. And that's about it. So, but this was in Texas, right?
Yes, in the Texas Panhandle.
Okay, awesome. All right, are we done? Anybody else got any other comments here? I think we got to wrap this thing up here. I think we're good. So, Karen, thank you for coming on the show. Fascinating topic tonight. Here's the deal. If you're a noob, we typically produce the show Monday nights, and we're back on the Monday night regular schedule between now and Christmas. And we are on the air at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. And you can watch this live on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/weatherbrains. But we know that most of you listen. And if you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. And again, Jen is out of town. She's down here. She'll be back next week. We'll do a long email segment next week. So love to hear from you. But on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks, Karen. That was a fun show. Great show.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank y'all for the opportunity. That was fun.